Hey there, guys, and a big welcome back to the Blaze TV podcast. It's Ed Kimberley and Stu Coles with you. And our guest on this edition is brand new Coventry Blaze forward, Mike Regush. Mike, a big welcome to the Coventry Blaze organization. Really looking forward to having you with us. How's your summer been so far?
Yeah, thanks for having me on, guys. I'm really excited to join the team and get into Coventry and get going. But the summer's been really good. We were talking about before we started the recording about the nice weather here. I think we share similar patterns with England and Coventry specifically in Vancouver. So been trying to enjoy the weather, been training, been skating. A lot of my friends still play either in Europe or in North America. So we get together and get to work out together, get to skate, and then kind of just trying to enjoy the outdoors. I don't know if pickleball is a sport in in England or is picked up, but we played quite a bit of pickleball, started getting more into that this summer, a little bit of golf. Admittedly, I'm still pretty tragic at golf, so it's more range work than on the course. Biggest expense is all the lost balls, not actually the course fees. And then just getting down to, I live pretty close to the water, to the beach. There's a couple beaches near me. Not white sand beaches, but just going for walks there and, grabbing a nice coffee and heading over there with my girlfriend or my folks and kind of enjoying the weather here. So it's been really good.
Yeah, that sounds like a pretty idyllic summer, if you ask me. And particularly having a contract to play hockey next year in Coventry. But I guess we'll come back to that later. We've done the geography, like you say, you've done your homework on the climate, where everything's situated. But I'm gonna do history instead if we're talking about subjects at school. And
Yeah.
we're gonna take a little bit of a trip back in time, a little bit down memory lane. Um, and actually, I say that I'm gonna take a couple of steps forward and then take a couple of steps back because looking down your career, looking through your CV, it looked like pretty early on, like going back to your days at the Delta Academy, you were kind of thinking that the NCAA was going to be the route for you. But there's plenty of other, hockey opportunities in British Columbia. The Western League's got a pretty good stamp there, for example, in the Major Junior. So why did you kind of go down that NCAA route? And was it really early on in your career? Am I correct? That's kind of what you were thinking?
Yeah, it's going to be a little bit of a long-winded answer, actually, Ed, for you on that. Um, the simple answer is one thing kind of led to another where it was very much the obvious choice for me. I know the cliche answer you get from guys is about development path and time. But what happened for me was I had my grade 8 year, which is so your bantam draft is really early for the WHL, which I think you guys are maybe familiar with, but it's in the Western
Yeah.
League, it's end of grade 9. So my grade 8 year, I made our top team in my catchment. I was the only kid who was in grade 8. Everyone else was grade 9, and I'm a fairly late like birthday in September. So like the next youngest guy on our team would have been 10 months, 11 months older than me. Had a really good year. Our team was good. We went to a couple of really big tournaments. We came second in one of the two biggest tournaments in Western Canada. Lost in the quarters of another one. Had like 6 or 7 guys drafted that year. Blow up plus tax. Looked like I was, gonna have a good year. Fast forward to the next year, one thing leads to another. I don't grow. I'm like still 5'5" that year. Uh, got injured. Honestly, a lot of other moving parts. My grandma died. It was a tough year. Long story
Mm.
short, and to end up not getting drafted. So now we're going into grade 10. I quickly get listed by the Kelowna Rockets. However, I'm playing through my grade 10 year. I go to their kind of the parts of I went to Prince George's camp that year. And then early in the year, they were going to list me. Kelowna beat them to it, play my grade 10 year, kind of start progressing and playing better. My grade 11 year, I almost make the BCHL. I was the last cut off the Langley Riverman, was affiliated with them.
Mhm.
So I almost played junior A as a 16-year-old. Played through my Delta year, I played really, really well. Got connected, started having a couple teams talk to me, and Michigan Tech offered me a full ride. Harvard offered me a scholarship. Cornell offered me a scholarship before I'd actually played junior. And it kind of happened that at that point, I was really wanted by programs. So I kind of weighed my options. And when you have prestigious institutions talking to you, specifically like Harvard and Cornell, Cornell was one of my like dream schools in terms of marrying hockey and academics together. So it just made sense. So then the following year, going into grade 12, the Rockets said, "Hey, you should come to our camp. You're, really, really likely to make our team. Obviously you have to perform. Nothing's guaranteed with a, it's like, so pardon me, a team like the Rockets. They were really good at that time." They actually had Draisaitl go through that team that year, but a bunch of other stud players. But what happened is I had a scholarship. I said, no, I'm okay. And then I played in the BCHL. So it kind of just everything kind of kept funneling into. And before I'd played junior, I played a couple AP games, I guess. But before I'd really played junior, I had a scholarship and it just made sense to go that route. So a little bit of a long-winded answer for you, but it was really fortunate for me. And I guess the ability to go and get your education and still play, it just made a lot of sense.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I guess just to frame the answer there a little bit as well, Canadian grades are essentially 1 year lower than the UK. So grade 8 over in Canada is about year 9 for us, the way I understand it, just to kind of give a little bit of context there. But you've skipped over
Yeah.
quite a few good years of hockey in there, Mike. I'm going to take those apart as well. We're on the podcast. We're going to go down memory lane. I'm not going to leave too many stones unturned because one thing that was quite interesting there, and you mentioned obviously you were the last cut or one of the last cuts with Langley
Yeah.
in the British Columbia League, but then you kind of ended up full time with Merit. How did it kind of end up that you got called up by one organization, but then ended up spending pretty much the rest of your time with another?
Yeah, it's an interesting story. Um, and actually one that didn't really play out as well as I'd hoped. I liked the coach in Langley. He basically it looked like I was pretty much going to play on the team in grade 12. It's a good program, was close to home, and then ended up talking to Merritt too. They had a scout there that came to a bunch of my games. He really saw the way I played and understood me, and he was the head scout. Dan Sallows was his name at the time. And the coach in Merritt was a really good coach, Luke Pierce. Luke's now coaching the Edmonton Oil Kings, if you look him up.
Wow.
So Luke was another guy who I had a lot of faith in their development process. And I thought they saw me a little clearer for who I was. And I thought there was going to be better opportunity in my grade 12 year. So what ended up happening is I committed to kind of go there because I liked Luke. I felt like that was the best fit for me in my development process, opportunity wise, coaching wise, et cetera, et cetera. And then, like maybe 2 months after I committed, Luke got a job with the Kootenay Ice in the WHL. So he was gone. And it was pretty funny because I actually heard it from my advisor before I heard it from Luke. So Luke calls me and he goes, "Hey, I got to talk to you." And I said, "I guess congratulations are in order." And he goes, "Oh, so you heard?" And I said, "Yeah, I heard. Congrats, well deserved." So he was a very good coach. And then I don't know what he did intermittently because I didn't follow him, but he was with the Ice and then he wasn't. And now I know he is with the Oil Kings. So very good coach, smart guy. But ended up with Joe Martin, who's now done a good job in Alberni. But frankly, I don't know if that would have been the route that I would have went. It was kind of Luke and Dan kind of sold me on merit, development opportunity wise, and then just kind of played out differently than I planned.
Yeah, it didn't work out too bad though. I mean, let's be honest, year one, I think you only missed out on the postseason on a tiebreaker to Vernon, if I've got that correct. And losing out on a
Yeah.
tiebreaker must really suck.
Yeah, it was interesting. We won our last game too to I think it was against the V's too. And we needed Vernon to lose and they didn't lose the game, so we had the same amount of points. So yeah, I remember that a lot of tears, a lot of upset people. Hard seeing like the 20-year-olds who have aged out who are, that's their career, right? They're done now. They're not going to
Yeah.
college. So yeah, I remember that pretty well. And you know what? It's funny. Our team, we had a weird team because I would say our team was pretty strong. We had some really good players, and we just seemed to kind of lose some close games and lose games we probably should have won. And we went on a really bad slide for a bit, and um, yeah, it just didn't quite materialize. But like that, we easily could have been a playoff team. You can understand that when you're a point away from losing in a tiebreak. So is what it is.
And a little bit of a blast from the past was with you on that roster. A bit of an obscure Blaze reference in a guy called Nick Germain, who was with Coventry during the lockdown season. We had like a 14 tournament locked in Nottingham called the Mini Series. What was it like playing
Yep.
with Nick? Because we loved having him while he was. I say while he was here. He played for Coventry, but never actually set foot in Coventry, from what I understand.
Oh, really? That's funny. You know what? Nick was a good player. We weren't super close that year because he was 19 and I was 17. So I was in high school. I was in my like senior year. I don't know what that would be,
Yep.
but your final year of high school and didn't live together. So Never got super close with him, but he was a good player. I know he had a really good year the year I was there, and obviously him and Colin Granary would have been our like top scorers, I believe. Then went on. I played him at Quinnipiac, so quite a bit. And I think he was a captain his senior year, so
He
he
was.
was a good player. But I wouldn't say we were particularly close.
Was it that first season? I was trying to go through the timeline that you talked about earlier. Was it that first season that you committed to Cornell?
So I think officially I was committed to Cornell that year, but
Okay,
verbally I committed to Cornell the end of my grade 11 year. So like timeline wise, our season would have started in September, and verbally I was committed in like May. So you
fine.
can officially back then, I don't believe you could commit until your grade 12 year. You start playing, which is your senior year, right? But verbally I was committed to Cornell at that point,
Yeah,
if
and I
that
was
makes
just going to
sense.
ask you to. No, it absolutely does. I was just going to ask you to like elaborate on why Cornell. I know you kind of covered it briefly, but you mentioned in
Yep.
there you were courted by Harvard, Michigan Tech. You know, Harvard's obviously a very prestigious place. They've got a pretty good hockey
Yep.
program too. Michigan Tech's got a great hockey program. So, what swung it? What made you stamp the passport and head to Cornell?
So this is the funny thing. Back then, I think they've changed the rules now, but back then you actually couldn't tour. So you
Oh,
couldn't tour
really?
the schools. So I committed without ever touring a school, which is funny. And I ended up getting my official visit like 2 years later, 2.5 years later after I technically committed, when I was in Youngstown. But which is another funny story actually. But um, I think just we talked to my trainer had went to Cornell. He spoke really highly of the program. So small world. He kind of made the initial introduction with them. And I kind of had a list of schools that in my head were really high end hockey and high end academics. And I kind of wanted that. I don't use this word, but it is true. The backup plan of, if hockey doesn't go well, you have that, fallback plan. And Cornell just made a lot of sense, right? They had an excellent, the program I ended up taking was applied economics and management and incredibly low. I think back then it was like a 2.8% acceptance rate to get into that specific program, which hockey obviously helps you get in, but they can't do too much at the Ivy Leagues to help you get in. So you have to get in somewhat on your own merit. But yeah, they had everything I wanted, right? They had the hockey culture. They still had the fan base. That's something. No knock on Harvard here, but Harvard, when we used to play at Harvard on Cornell, we called it Lina East, and our home rink we were obviously more Western. We had
Yeah.
more fans. It was like a home game for us. It was pretty
Wow.
cool. Not a knock, not a shot. Anyone who's went to Harvard, if we have anyone coming, maybe, but the fan support and the atmosphere is probably the best in that conference. There's a few other that are very high end, but the winning culture. I can't say enough good things about their coaching staff, especially Mike Schaefer. Like the guy's just he gets the most out of his players. Like unbelievably smart hockey mind. He helped me develop a lot as a player. I know they were disappointed when I left early, and that was another story for financial reasons because you're on financial aid at the Ivies, you don't get a full scholarship. So, um, when you can save some money when it's expensive to go to American schools, it makes sense to do it. But yeah, it was awesome. It just had everything you could kind of possibly want in a school, and yeah, I really enjoyed my time there.
What effect did it have on you, still playing junior? I've got a couple of junior years yet to rattle through here. So, like, knowing that's in the back pocket, know that you're committed, how do you think that affected your mindset towards your hockey?
It's going to sound silly to say this, but I don't think it did it at all because I always had my eyes on pro.
Sure.
Um, and I'm a competitor by nature, so I would say I didn't really take anything for granted with that. It was like, okay, so that's taken care of. Great. Don't think about it. So I think it was nice to not have to think about in terms of it was nice to have it wrapped up, but it wasn't something that I would say I took for granted or I was, okay, now you can take time off because I always viewed college as a stepping stone onto the next thing. So it was nice to have it early and feel like, this group's behind you and they believe in you. But ultimately, to be blunt, there's lots of stories of people getting committed early and then they go to the school and they don't pan out and they don't play. So it's always got to go prove yourself. It's always, next person up. So if you don't go in ready, you're not going to play as a freshman. So that was kind of my philosophy was you need to go in and work every day. And, you're going to be playing against 23, 24, 25 year olds in college and, or the best 18-year olds who are first round picks like Michigan looks up every year. So you need to be ready to go. And while it's very nice to have that part of it sorted out, it wasn't something that, you can just rest on your laurels, so to speak, in that case. So yeah, it wasn't really massively impactful in my mindset, I suppose.
Yeah, I think you've answered it actually how I kind of would have expected someone that's going to play for Kevin Moore to answer it. And essentially you've said, okay, I knew what I wanted, I've got what I wanted, but I want to go and play there. I don't want it to not pan out, so I'm going to be the best version of Mike Regush going into that, that freshman season and actually play. Because guys can go into the NCAA in their first year and actually not play all that much. But clearly that didn't happen. But we'll come on to that a little bit later. Because we've got another year in merit to talk about. Because year two, you actually did make the playoffs, and this was a bigger season
Yeah.
for you. You're a year older. You get that bigger role, and you stepped up. You doubled your production, and it was a pretty good playoff run in the end, wasn't it?
Yeah, funny story about that though. That's very interesting for hockey players or athletes in general, that things don't always start the way you want. So we had a guy named Ethan Skinner on that team who was a year older than me. He was 19, came from the Gouge, was a very good hockey player.
Mm.
But he ended up starting the year. So if you go and ever find the line chart from the start of that year, I started that year as a fourth line center.
Wow.
So I'm now a second year playing fourth line center in our team. And our coach looks at me and goes, listen, you could play up the lineup. We're going to use you to lengthen the lines. And I'm sitting here going, oh man, like now I'm 18. I'm playing fourth line in the BCHL. How is this going to springboard me into the NCAA? Like blah, 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 plus tax. So I'm a little bit freaking out, right? And there's a lot of people who are around you, advisors, family, friends, and they're, oh, it's not fair and it's bad. And it wasn't great, to be honest. And if you asked me coldly and analytically, I thought I was better than I was getting played for that game, right? So what ends up happening, what's funny is this Ethan Skinner was a good, very good player, by the way. If you go look up, he was very good in the Gouge. I think he played at CIS. Great guy. Don't have a bad thing to say about him. But he ends up leaving. The second game of the year, we end up coming home. We play Trail. I get promoted basically to first line center. I think I had 2 or 3 points in the game. And it kind of springboarded the year. And the year went really well after that. And that year I got to play for the Canadian Junior A Challenge with like
Yep.
Cale McCarr would be the biggest name as our captain. He was an absolute great guy and a stud player. But a bunch of other good names played on that team. And then I also got to play at the top prospects game, which I had 2 assists in, which I played well at. Um, and then obviously it culminates in a playoff run where we took Penticton, who was the eventual winners, to 7 games. A lot of people didn't think we could, even really play with them. So, and they ended up winning. So the point of that, the reason I mentioned that is it's funny how hockey goes, where if you had asked after that first game, it was like all panic, it was terrible. So, and it's interesting how the year played out, where I had a lot of individual success and the team had success, but a lot of individual success personally. And it started off looking very, very negative. So, and the year went really well. So, but that was kind of how the year went. Lots of really cool experiences, and the team is, a couple bounces away in an unfortunate game 7 in Penticton, the second round, potentially being a third round team. So it was a lot better. Good step forward from first year.
Yeah, and I guess again it speaks to your mindset because within that answer you're essentially saying I'm ready to go. I'm gonna grit my teeth. I'm gonna grind. I'm gonna work every day. Try and serve the team the best way I can. Boom, the opportunity opens up and you grab it with both hands. And not to go on a rant too much, but you see so much stuff on social media about you know kids getting a bit frustrated that they're not playing, not sticking it out, trying to move around a bit. Where actually sometimes it's better just to stay put, work. The environment you're in, and good things generally happen to people that work the backsides off. But a funny story because you've got a couple of funny stories in here. Funny story coming out of your second year in the BCHL, you end up getting drafted in the USHL into Youngstown. How did that come about? Was that out of the blue? Was that expected? I'm not 100% sure on the relationship between those two leagues.
So I guess the simplest way, and it's hockey's so complicated with leagues. I mean, it's no different really in the UK with how many, or sorry, pardon me, in Europe with how many leagues there are, and tiers and whatnot, right? But the best way to think about it is, and apparently this might change. Totally side note here, they might change the major junior rule to be able to go to college. Different conversation for a different day. But
Yep.
if you play in major junior, which is the CHL, right, which has the Western League, which is basically British Columbia, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and then I guess Oregon and Washington have teams. Those leagues is the Western League, right? So if you come from any of those places, there's states cut off.
Yep.
And then there's the Ontario League, which is teams in Pennsylvania and Michigan as well, and then Ontario.
Yep.
And then there's the QMJHL, which is, I don't think they have any American teams. It's all just the Maritimes and Quebec.
Yep.
Basically, you play on those teams, you can't go to college, right? Now,
Yep.
there's certain loopholes, and occasionally a guy sits a year, but generally speaking, you sign, you play, you're done. So if you want to go to the NCAA, the highest levels in Canada is the CJHL, Canadian Junior Hockey League, which is another mess, different conversation. The BCHL ended up leaving, and not going to get into that. That's, we can, another podcast if you want to talk about that another time. But basically, at the time, the BCHL was more or less regarded as the best junior league in Canada if you wanted to go to the NCAA. That being said, the USHL was quite a bit better. The USHL is pretty definitively the best league you can play in and still go to the NCAA. And the evidence I would give that is we had a tryout for that team, and we cut guys my year who were NCAA Division I commits, and they went to the NAL, the North American Hockey League, which is obviously under the USHL. So the theory on that is it's harder to play in the USHL than it is to play in the NCAA. And you could argue that based on the fact that every year there's guys cut who have scholarships and end up playing in the NCAA. So what happened is I talked to Cornell, and if you go and look at my the class ahead of me at Cornell, there's a lot of really good players who had a ton of success in college and pro, and they had a big class. So they kind of said to me, like, listen, don't come in. And it was a conversation, but if a coaching staff is telling you not to go and you go, you're probably not going to play a lot. Like, that's just, maybe you could force your way and impress a lot of people, but that was kind of the go take a year to develop. So I felt like, and the reason I give all that background information is I felt like, okay, I had kind of accomplished what I wanted to in the BCHL. I wanted a new experience, a new challenge. And I decided, talking to people around me and kind of my close confidants and advisors, you know what, maybe let's pursue something in the top league and challenge yourself. And I think this will better prepare you to step into the NCAA and be an impactful player when you're 20. So we had conversations. I talked to a number of teams that were looking for a player like me who needed an import and wanted a center. And it ended up happening that Youngstown took me kind of first amongst those players. So I ended up going there.
And I think in terms of like the culture as well, obviously being a Canadian boy growing up in BC, you're going to go to Cornell in the States. It was nice to have like that little gap in between and spend some time playing hockey in the US and in Ohio. But tell us about like the difference between the two, because I've not been to British Columbia, I've not been to Ohio, but I've got this impression in my head they're pretty different.
Yeah, I'm going to give you a hot take here that I think if you ask most Canadians, they'd tell you, yeah, Americans are way different than Canadians. I don't really find that, to be honest. And it's different on a college campus. Like in a college town on a college campus, that's very different. Obviously in Ohio, Youngstown is a bit of a rough city, to be honest with you, if you go look it up. But they do have a college there. It's Youngstown State. And then we lived outside, kind of in Boardman. So it's like 30 minutes outside of Youngstown with my billets, which was, was fine. They're different, but it's like, it's kind of like saying England's different to Canada. It's like, yeah, they are, but it's like you said, well, they celebrate Christmas and they celebrate Easter, and the weather's similar to here. Like you find more similarities than differences when you're looking, if that makes sense. And when you try to find differences, they're there, but it's like, is that the majority of it? Not really. That would be my take, at least. So there are absolutely some differences, and it does feel a little different culturally, but there's a lot more similarities than differences in between the
Sure.
two, if that makes sense.
No, it absolutely does. And it was either way, it was a good hockey season for you, right? I mean, I think you came second in the East, only second to the US development team, which is
Yeah.
pretty crazy. I mean, you talk about Cale Makar, and I think you crossed paths with them in college at some point, but they're always stacked, the US national development team. And then you knock them out in the playoffs as well before, losing in the finals to Fargo. So, like,
Yeah.
what was it like knocking them off in the playoffs on the route to the national finals? That must have been incredible.
So candidly with you guys, what they do in that league, then I don't know if you know in England is they have a U17 team and a U18 team.
Yep.
So the U18 team is like the draft prospect team. And if you go look at that team, they're stacked.
Yep.
And the funny thing is they actually took the 2 or 3 best 17s, which was like Caulfield, Hughes, and I don't remember, they had one more, and they pulled them up to the 18s.
Okay.
So the 18 team was nasty. Um, so they only played 30 of the games. So in the playoffs, where I'm going with this is the 17s who are really great 11s. They're a year away from being draft eligible. We actually played them in the playoffs.
Oh,
So
sure.
we beat the U17s, which we consistently did, but the U18s consistently beat us that year, even as the second team in the East. And it was hilarious. It was hilarious because the games were always really weird. Like they were always like 8-5, 6-4, like always high scoring, high octane games. I'm pretty sure we had a game in the playoffs that was 10-7 that we lost, like just ridiculous games. And it's weird because you just end up playing that style. That was literally, they'd be like 4-on-2s, they'd play, then you break out the other way. So um, I don't want to say we expected to beat them, like, but we should. But if we had played the 18s, I don't know if we would have, to be honest with you. It was they were pretty darn good. So, and I don't think our regular season record, we maybe beat them once I think we played them 4 times. We played this, and then we played the other group 4 times because we were the closest team other than Muskegon to Ann Arbor where they're located.
Sure, fair enough. And that year as well, you got to cross paths with someone you'll be crossing paths with this year in good old Chase Gresock, who, funnily enough, we actually saw last night. We've recorded back-to-backs in the podcast, and he was
Nice.
speaking he was speaking quite highly of you, Mike. So tell us about playing with Chase down there in Youngstown. What was that like?
Uh, Playing with Chase is probably the most fun I ever had playing hockey. That and it's an interesting story again where I went to Youngstown and at Christmas I had 12 points in I think it was what did I end up playing that year? I think it was 12 points in 22 games. It's a slow start, didn't get played a ton to start. It was kind of in the third line role, did play power play, killed a bit, but wasn't playing a ton until and wasn't producing a lot either. And that league's fairly, and it used to be harder to score in because they got all the European goalies. The European goalies, they used to have a rule against them playing in the CHL. So, like the major juniors.
Yep.
And so they had really, really good goaltenders back then. So, anyway, they ended up throwing Chase, Matt Barry, and I together. And Matt Barry played, I think, for the
He was in
Clan
Glasgow.
last year.
Yep.
Um, so he probably the most fun I ever had. I had like 36 points in 36 games in the second half. We all just really clicked, got along really well. Um, so it was a blast. And Chase is a great hockey player. It's funny and it's hard to say this about a lot of guys, but he doesn't really have a weakness in his game. He's smart. He skates well. He's got an absolute cannon of a shot that's super accurate, killer release, makes good plays, knows, but he can manage the game too. He's not a guy who's going to be stupid and take high risk. Like, no, can be a team guy, can play defensively. So just all around, like, couldn't ask for a better winger to play with, and was an absolute just pleasure to play with that year. And so was Maddie. But we all kind of had slightly different games and complement each other very well. So, but yeah, he's going to be a great player, and Coventry's very lucky to have him.
And he seems like he's going to complement the dressing room quite well as well. He's a really affable guy. Really enjoyed talking to him.
Yeah, no, and I super likable guy. No, I think you'll be hard pressed to find a guy that says they don't like Chase.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I realize we've rattled on quite a lot here, Mike, and I've got Stu waiting in the wings. And as a highly educated
Yeah,
man, Stu, do you want to take all of the NCAA career up to now?
yeah, for sure. So we've had the sort of story where you sort of committed early on, and you know you're going to Cornell, and they sort of say, well, actually, hold off a year because we're kind of, for what or at least in paraphrasing, we're stacked. You're not getting any game time, so
Yeah,
you're taking that time. But then when you do get there, that year in Youngstown really has helped you because you hit the ground running in your first year in Cornell. You get 12 goals as a freshman. I mean, it's tough in NCAA Div 1 to get ice time as a freshman, but to get 12 goals, you kind of fit in really well straight off the bat, which was kind of your goal that you'd set yourself a few years earlier.
yeah, absolutely. I think the other thing too is I don't know if this has always worked out in my career as far as I had hoped it would, but when people invest in you, whether it's a pro team, a college team, a junior team, and they pick you and you're taking a spot, you kind of owe it to that organization to show up ready to go to the very, very best of your ability. And that was honestly my philosophy with college, which sometimes I would say I was a stick in the mud in school. I was there for school and hockey and not a lot else, which is pretty lame. But and I you know, you have your fun, you pick your spots, but that was it. Like going to play in the NCAA and hitting the ground running was my goal. And I think there's definitely some hiccups the first year. There was stretches where, you know, frustration was there and you weren't producing as much as you wanted to. But like you said, as a freshman to score 12 goals, and I think I was second in the team in scoring here, and the only guy who outscored me, and it was Barron, who plays in the NHL for the Jets. That's a pretty successful year. Maybe I could have passed a little bit better and get a couple more assists, but it was a really good year, and obviously the team had a ton of success. We didn't start off well. We got swept by Michigan State at home, which we weren't supposed to. We were ranked fairly high going in, and kind of crawled back the whole year, and then made the tournament, won a game, and then got absolutely waxed by Providence. But we're missing our starting goalie. Had a couple other key injuries, so it could have been a different game maybe if we were fully loaded for that. But it was a great year and an awesome experience, and then obviously that led into the second year.
Yeah, and that first year, the regular season, I think if I'm right, you ended up tied first overall in that regular season with Quinnipiac, and they're just one of a number of really good teams, aren't they? That sort of the ECAC side. It's a really strong conference out there.
Yeah, it is. And you know what? I actually think I think I scored the goal to technically clinch the tying goal against Clarkson to clinch the regular season win, so the Cleary Cup. Um, I'd be lying if I said regular season wins were super valued there. I would say probably the playoff, like, you know, obviously the NCAA is one, then it's playoffs, then it's probably the Ivy League, and then it's probably the ECAC championship. Not to say it wasn't appreciated or valued, but it just wasn't necessarily the end all be all for us. If that and that sounds bad, but it's kind of like in soccer, how or sort of pardon me, football over there, but how there's certain things that, like, you know, winning the Premier League is like better than winning the FA Cup, or like winning the, you know, Europa isn't as good as winning the Champions League. It's kind of like there's obviously scales to it.
Oh, for sure, and I'm glad that you corrected yourself when you said soccer and then moved to football,
Yes.
because that is something that you all need to understand very quickly, that there are the right way to say things and the wrong way to say things, and that is definitely one of them. And that you follow that up in year two. Nearly identical number of goals, with the sort of the caveat that actually you're going for a special season and then COVID hits and like season gets cut short, and you had that again, that regular season win, which it's good and it sets you up for all those other things that you want to achieve, but then you don't get to achieve them because the season's kind of taken away. How difficult was that to kind of sort of cope with that sort of very quick change?
It's funny. It's something that's hard to reflect on. I don't know if you ever fully will get over that as a group. And the only reason I say that is that's probably the most magical season I've ever been a part of the team. And it was weird. If you ever go look at games, there was games we would play awful. Like I remember we played a game against Union. We were abysmal in Union. And like Shafe was not impressed with the group. Lines were juggled. And we ended up tying them. And I think it was Tristan Mullen shoots a puck off my shin pad, goes off my kneecap and in, and that ends up being our tying goal. Like things just, we played Providence in a tournament. We were losing 2-1. Probably were outplayed the whole game. We technically lost in a shootout because it was like a mini friendship tournament, like kind of like the Friendship Four at Belfast. It was that, but in Vegas, for our teams, and we were in the second game of it. And Barron scores a beautiful goal, like right under the bar, for us to tie. Like we found ways to like crawl back into games we shouldn't have been. We won all the games we should win, with the exception of we started 10-0 that year, and then we were playing Dartmouth. And I was just telling somebody about this actually today at the rink, where we were 10-0 to start the year. And then the last game before Christmas break, we go to Dartmouth and we lost 3-2, but I swear to God, we hit no less than 8 posts and crossbars. Like we should have won the game. And then we only had one other regulation loss where I don't know what happened in the game. Quinnipiac absolutely just hammered us 5-0 when we were on the road, and they were at home. But yeah, that team, it's funny because, and the reason I give the context for that is that's one of the few things in my life I look back on and I really go, man, I wonder what if. And it was crazy because we played Clarkson, and it was at home, admittedly, but it was the last game before COVID shut everything down. And it was funny. My line was kind of the question line where they kept rolling guys through. Max Andreev, who just had a really good year in the coast, played some games in the for Coachella in the American League. Really good center from Russia. Has been over in the States for quite a while. And myself were kind of a pair, but we couldn't find the third guy. And then Zach Tupker ended up jumping our line. We were lights out that weekend. And it was kind of like everything all of a sudden was like firing on perfectly all cylinders. And we're playing Princeton. It's like we're gonna hammer these guys. We're gonna walk through. They hadn't won. Cornell has since actually won a playoffs, but they hadn't won a playoff since like 2010. We're like, this is our year. We're gonna go. And I really think I don't want to say we would have won an NCAA championship because North Dakota was really good that year. That we were kind of switching ranked one, but I really think we would have made the Frozen Four that year. And then who knows? But I really think we would have won a couple of tournament games and gone from there. And it's something that didn't happen. And when you reflect on it that way, with just so many things, so many good pieces, you go look at the roster, so many guys either played NHL or American League experience, like a lot of American League experience, great coaching staff. And the team was really like firing on all cylinders at the right time of year, which everyone always talks about when you go into playoffs. It's unfortunate things played out that way with COVID, and obviously a lot of people were affected more than losing a hockey season. I appreciate that, of course, that you don't compare the loss of a hockey year to the tragedies that did happen and occur. But it's definitely something that's it stinks. It's the easiest way. It really stinks because it's something you'll never know, and you'll definitely wonder for the rest of my life. And I know everyone else in that team will too.
Yeah, and we've mentioned this on a previous podcast as well, that actually that draws a lot of parallels to the Coventry season at that time, because 2019, 2020, the team had a bit of a bumpy start, but then there was this moment where all of a sudden it clicks, everything comes together, and the team towards the end of the season were flying, wins coming in. They, league's top goal scorer, league's top player on assist, wins aplenty. And there was a belief in Coventry that there hadn't been for a little while, and it felt that opportunity was kind of sort of taken away at the end, where something magical could have happened, and we'll never know, much like you'll never know either. But it is, like you say, it is in the whole scheme of things, relatively minor when you sort of reflect back on the whole sort of pandemic time, as it were. Speaking of that, 2020, 2021, a lot of the leagues shut down, teams don't play. You didn't play with Cornell. So what did you do in that time? Did you finish off school? What did that year look like for you?
Yeah, it's you're spot on. So what I ended up doing that year is, and this is kind of what I got into it when I mentioned it briefly before, was so I was done. I don't exactly know the system in the UK or in England, but you have 120 credits effectively to finish. So I was at 61 credits going into that summer, and they shut down. And I started to go, okay, so everything's online. So I was like, all right, well, maybe I'll load up my course schedule. And we go to, I actually went to Cornell for about 5 or 6 weeks. And we're practicing at this like community arena off campus because the rink was shut down, gym was shut down. We have like a makeshift gym. I'm driving to like a CrossFit gym, lifting with a mask. The mask is sweaty, can't breathe. Like it was a nightmare. So I end up talking to my coach, and I go, you know what, I want to go home. And he's like, I don't know if I want to go. I'm like, I'm gonna go home because this isn't serving me well. The team's not really together anyway. When we get a decision in 6 to 8 weeks, we'll figure it out together. So I end up going home. A bunch of the NHL guys were actually still here because the season had gotten pushed back. So I started skating at Delta. hockey academy, which the guy who runs it is Ian Gallagher. Brendan Gallagher plays the Canadians. There was a group there. I got out with them, which was great. And then U Sports had canceled their year at this point completely. And my really good friend, who's now a gym trainer, had a successful career in U Sports. Him and I are just working out together. We're skating, doing some private stuff together. And then I'm also skating with this like NHL group. Fast forward 6 weeks, I'm still home, starting to train, doing my courses online. Not a big deal. Time changing. It's 3 hours. It's, you know, it's big, but it's not massive, if that makes sense. Because I think my first class was 11:40 Eastern, so it was 8:40 my time. Not the end of the world. So anyway, setting the stage for you, what ends up happening is they just cancel the year outright. They go, we're not playing at all. And we were like, the Ivies were the only teams to do that. I think maybe there might have been 2 other teams I'm missing in that, but they basically were some of the only hockey teams to cancel the year. So, and they shut down our skating until like the spring semester, which is, you know, February. So I'm like, okay, I'm gonna stay home again. And then I kind of took a week. I look at my schedule, I talk to my folks, and I go, you know, I think I can graduate early. And they're like, well, do you want to do that? Do you want to finish at Cornell? You know, you're going to have to transfer, blah, 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 plus tax. And I go, well, let's think about it this way. I think I can transfer and get a full ride, where right now we're paying quite a hefty sum through financial aid, which it was, you know, discounted massively. Because I think the tuition's like 80,000 a year for US which is more even in Canadian because of the dollar exchange, because our dollar stinks. But again, different conversation. But so, and my parents were helping me out massively. So I was like, I don't want my parents helping me out and paying for this. So I kind of looked at my scheduling. I figured out I could finish my coursework, and I ended up I talked to the coach. I said very early on, I said, listen, it's a financial decision. I love you guys. I love the program. You know, I don't have anything bad to say about the program. I only have good things to say about Cornell and my time there. But ultimately, I looked at it as a financial move, and then I decided to graduate early. I know they were upset I left early, and you know, looking back, I'm not even sure it was the best thing to do, to be honest with you. But saved a ton of money, and then I ended up getting a full ride over at Miami, and that year was just spent doing schoolwork and training and working out at home.
Yeah, and then you mentioned there that you end up going to Miami, Ohio, and we are reunited once again along the way with your new fellow Blaze player, Chase Gresock. And did he sort of recruit you in? Did you because you both sort of ended up in the same place at the same time? Was that kind of a conversation you had, or was it just purely by chance?
No, it was a conversation we had. Like I said, I didn't play at all that year. So I committed to Miami around, I'm going to say it was November of that, what would that be? 2020, for the following year. Because it was early, because they said, oh, can you graduate and transfer for the following semester? And I was like, no, I can't get everything done. So, and then Chase finished his year in, you know, March, April, and Matt and I were going to be there. So we talked to him and kind of had the conversation with him coming in.
And that year kind of sort of goes well. And then maybe through some of the connections you made, I don't know, but you, being from British Columbia, you got invited to the Canucks training camp. So you kind of, that's a, you know, getting in even a foot in the door in the NHL is a lovely plus. So that must have been a real highlight.
Well, I gotta say this, my year at Miami did not go very well. So I was pretty fortunate to get the invite, and there was a bunch of things. I got kind of long COVID. Had a bad high ankle sprain. I did something to my groin at the start of the year for not playing for a year. So it was nice of you to say it went kind of well, but it didn't. Chase had a bit better year than me, definitely production wise, but he also had a high ankle sprain, and it was a case of just a lot of stuff actually went wrong for both of us. And we happened to be roommates when we were there. And I'll say this, Chase, best roommate I've ever had. But it was an unfortunate year. So I ended up getting somewhat blessed, to be honest, that I got the opportunity to go to Canucks training camp. So I go to the rookie camp, right? And that's up in Penticton. It's a British Columbia thing. My agent pulled some strings, to be honest with you. And they had some Euro guys not come. So I ended up kind of getting in. Probably a nice story for a hometown kid, and I played really well. It was that simple. I happened to be firing on all cylinders at the right moment. My body was good at that point, and I played really well. I was up in Penticton. From there, I got asked to go to the Canucks main camp in Whistler. So we come back to Vancouver, do some testing, go up to Whistler. And so this is actually an interesting story. And it's a case of things went well after my year. And the reason I said the year in Miami didn't go well, after the year didn't go well in Miami, everything kind of went well for a stretch for a bit. And so I get the invite, I play well, I get in for all the games at Penticton. I go to main camp, and Boudreau was the coach at the time. He pulls over the guys. They basically had 3 teams of 9 forwards and 6D, and then they had some extra players. And I was in the extra pool group. And the extra pool group was like, I think 4 forwards and 3D and maybe a goalie. So he ends up effectively saying to us, hey, listen, like, you guys aren't going to play in the scrimmages. And what they did every day is like, team 1 would do a long practice, team 2 would do a short practice, team 3 would do a short practice, and then team 2 and 3 would play each other, and team 1 would be done for the day, or they might do a workout. And then the next day, team 2 would do a long practice, team 3 would do a short, team 1 would do a short, team 1 and 3 would play. So basically every team got to play 2 games over the 3-day camp, and then they would do 1 long practice day where they kind of do some systems and practice stuff. So all the extras were in the practice group. So I ended up being in the practice group with, I don't know what team it was, but call it team 1 for argument's sake. Say they didn't play the first day. What ends up happening is I had a great practice. Like I stood out as probably, for whatever reason on that day, as the best player in the extra group. The next day, a guy gets sick. Will Lockwood was really sick, so he didn't practice. So they end up going, hey, Reeks, jump in with this line, which was Sheldon Dries and Phil DiGiuseppe, who both have quite a bit of NHL experience. It was really good, like basically Abbotsford's first line, and played really well in the scrimmage. So I get pretty fortunate. The next day, Lockwood's back. I'm like, too bad. I'm not gonna get to play today. The last rep of the last drill, and I feel bad for him, but it was lucky for me. Brock Besser injures his wrist, was out for like 8 weeks, literally the very last play. So I end up going from, they're like, you're not going to play, to actually you're going to jump on JT Miller's line, who's basically the Canucks' like best or second best player. And I'm playing with Miller and Pearson, and I end up scoring in the scrimmage. That just everything kind of went well, got offered a contract, and more or less forced my way onto the team. It was a case of, and that was kind of the way Ryan Johnson described it, was like, you've played too well for us not to give you a contract. But at the time, I really wasn't part of their plans. So they kind of looked at me and said, well, he's probably too good to only be on a coast deal, so we'll throw him on our team and see how he does. And then I ended up playing well through Abbotsford's camp and started the year, and I was playing quite a bit. And then, just to kind of go right into that year, Vancouver didn't have a very good year. So they started sending down some of the prospects, like Hoglander came down, played a ton. Podkolzin came down and started playing. Amon spent time down. He'd been in the NHL for a bit. They traded for another forward, Lane Peterson. He comes down. He's on an NHL deal. Very good player. Was ridiculous when he was there with us. Like 17 goals in 18 games in the American League is absurd. They trade Bo Horvat to the New York Islanders. We get Bavillier back. He goes to the NHL club. They get Ratty to our team. So like you can see, I started the year at like 10, 11 forward, and now you're like 16, 17. You keep getting pushed down. So they added so many, and then at the end of the year, they start signing free agents. So like a guy who I'm actually very good friends with now, Max Sasson, who's like was basically their first or second line center. He comes in further down the line. So I played a decent amount at the start of the year, and then they started just kind of Vancouver slid, and they started adding prospects, and you weren't part of their plans to begin with, and you kind of forced your way in. And then I got a concussion, and it kind of just started shifting out. So I didn't play a ton that year, but they kept me around. I don't know if I was a good room guy or a good practice player, but they kind of kept me around all year rather than send me to the coast. Just because we ended up having so many forwards and guys kind of who were on either NHL deals or 2-ways or entry levels that just kind of pushed me out.
And that's something that when we spoke to Kevin Moore, that he reflected on as well. It's like that, yes, you didn't play a ton, and you mentioned as well, injuries was a factor in that as well. But you stuck around the whole year, and you don't stay on an AHL roster without having some skill, some kind of positive characteristics that set you apart from the plethora of guys in the coast who are itching to get that deal. So I think you're right. It's a mark there of the sort of quality there. But you got a couple of goals in your time. What do you remember about sort of like that first AHL goal that you kind of get? You've gone pro. You're in the American League. It's kind of everything's kind of working there at that point in time.
It's a bit of a tragic story, actually. So, but I'll tell you why, and you'll see in a second. So we play in Seattle's practice rink the first day because Coachella had this weird schedule where their rink wasn't done in time. So they basically spent the entire, I don't know, first 2 months, 3 months on the road. But they had these 4 games at home, and it was in Seattle. And they're supposed to be down in California, basically in Palm Springs. But so we end up being the team that goes and plays. We didn't actually go to Palm Springs here. We went to Seattle, which was fine. We bust down, whatever, it's cool. But we play the first day in the practice rink, playing pretty well. I'm starting to kind of get like it's the third game in the A. I'm starting to kind of be like, okay, we're getting this. We're getting better. We're doing better and better. The next game, we're playing and see my parents are down. They come down to watch the second game because it's 3 hours from where 2.5 hours from where we are. And we're actually playing in the big NHL rink, Climate Pledge. Pretty cool. They had a decent crowd, 7,000 fans, which is like most of their lower bowl. And we're playing Coachella. They're a good team that year. We're on the penalty kill. We end up getting an opportunity. John Stevens cuts in front of me. I get a shot. I kind of shoot it through a screen. It's kind of a little bit of a rainbow over the goalie's pad to score. I'm like, I made it, man. Like this is the TSN turning point. This is where everything starts to go right. So going to the locker room, I'm like, I'm getting it now. Like I'm on the kill. I'm playing. I'm contributing. I feel good 5-on-5. I feel like I have a little bit more time and space. That's kind of a phenomenon as you get used to the speed and the level. You feel like, okay, I got a little bit more time and space to make reads and plays. I get cheap shot. I get hit in the back of the head and I get a concussion. I miss 4 weeks after that, like 3 shifts later in the third period. So it was a pretty bad concussion, like Bambi legs to the bench, like couldn't get up. And I chipped the puck in and a guy literally came up who's like 6'4", 6'5", and hits me, like elbows me kind of like this shot right to the back of which is this part of your brain is your like balance cortex.
Okay.
So through my balance and I couldn't really see. And then it was weird because as soon as I got off the ice, I was okay again. But yeah, I was out for about a month after that. And then Abby started adding players and that was it was kind of downhill almost after that in some regard.
Yeah. So, it's almost like you're top of the world, and then it must be heartbreaking and frustrating, and then injuries, and then you get to the end of the year, and then you end up last season effectively taking the whole year off. Was that just a decision to get the body right, take some time, and see where you're at initially? How did that sort of?
It was a mix of a bunch of factors. So I ended up getting nose surgery and I had a deviated septum for probably being hit in the face too many times. But what ended up happening was it was a couple things. So they ended up going in and doing the surgery and they're like, your nose is way worse than we thought. And what ended up happening is the best way to describe it is you obviously have the bridge of your nose, right? But there's a ton of bones back here. He's like, your nose was shattered. Everything in the back was a mess. He goes, I'm shocked you could breathe when you played. So it was a lot more serious than I originally thought. And he kind of did it on the fly. The doctor I had did a great job actually. And they redid it and scanned it after. It was great, but they didn't actually scan it before. They thought, oh, it's just a septum, basically just cut a piece of off, no worries. But what ended up happening is they just said a bunch of stuff. And I didn't get like a nose job, but I got everything redone back in there. If that kind of makes sense. So structurally it got fixed, but it took a long time to kind of set. And by the time I was healthy, and it seems like a minor thing, but when you're wearing a shield, like any kind of jarring could have basically really messed it up. And it was really bad before. So I had some offers to go play in the American League Coast two-way deals, exactly what I had with Abby, try to make a team. And by the time I was kind of right and started looking for deals, it was later in the year. And I would have been going to Europe, and it ended up just making more sense to kind of take the year, like you said, get the body right. But it stemmed from that surgery, which sounds minor, but it ended up kind of being major. And then it didn't feel right going into a team in Europe in like February, with like a couple months left. So I ended up just deciding to kind of shut her down for the year and then get ready for the next.
Yeah, fair enough. That sounds like a sensible plan. So there were offers on the table, but it never felt like the right opportunity. Is that, certainly across in terms of Europe, there wasn't really anything that really drew you in at that point in time?
Yeah, that's correct.
So if you've had that opportunity to potentially come to Europe, but nothing was the right fit, the obvious question then becomes, what makes Coventry now the right fit?
Because I get to talk to you guys, of course. Like, well, how else would I get to chat with you guys in my summers?
That's the correct
No,
answer, but probably not the one that coach would want.
no, that's just a bonus, right? No, honestly, the simple answer is you want to go it sounds again, you want to go somewhere where it feels like it's a fit. And you never know if it's a fit until we get going, but I will say Coach Kevin definitely made me feel like I think I see eye to eye very much on his philosophy of the game and how his coaching style and what he says. And every once in a while, you talk to somebody and it clicks and it makes sense. And it just felt like it was going to be a really successful year. I think he sees my type of game as a player pretty holistically and understands me, I think. And I think that's where I wanted to go somewhere where someone understands how I operate and where I'm at my best is going to push me to utilize me and push me to maximize my potential. So that was where it felt like a really really good fit. He knew of me and understood a little bit about my background. I was at Cornell because obviously he was at Princeton, not exactly in the timeline, but he would have known I was coming down the pipeline, would have followed the league a bit. So yeah, just super exciting. I know the league's obviously good and it's continuing to get better as more and more guys head over there. And then had heard good things about Coventry. Honestly, just kind of the league, but I'd heard good things through the grapevine of Coventry being a good spot and they treat the players well.
Mm. And tell us a little bit more about those conversations that you've had with Kevin Moore. He's kind of got a way of getting you excited about getting involved in things. There's like you say, there's a certain connection that he's able to develop there, even early right on in the process.
Yeah, he's a compelling guy. I don't know if I think it's partially because he's young. To be truthful, I think he connects with people and he understands players. The old school philosophy of do as I say while I scream at you and berate you is kind of going the way of the dodo bird with hockey. You get coaches who are analytical and want to relate to you, and they're going to hold you accountable and push you, but they're going to do it from a place of understanding, not a place of like dictatorship, I guess is the way I see it. And that's not to say it's not his ship and he doesn't have final say, but I felt like he's a guy who's going to look out for people and he's going to look out for me and he's going to push me to get the best of me. So when we talked about my fit and my role in the team, I just thought it was a great opportunity. And I think the other thing is the way he was talking about, he uses video and the way he analyzes things. I mean, I'll give you one piece of information. He's talking about hot zones, like where a guy's scoring from, and we look at where they're getting their best chances and grade A's. Like he's an analytical guy and he's going to utilize that, and I like that. But he's also not going to overdo it. So he was talking about how frequently do it, and it sounds like it's a good balance. And so I liked a lot of his philosophy, his style, the way he operates, the way he communicates. There's a lot going there, and I think the way he talks about hockey, he's a smart guy and he understands the game and he's very much a new school coach, and that's kind of the ideal fit for me at least.
Yeah, and you mentioned there as well that you'd heard good things about the Blaze and you'd heard good things about the league. How much do you know about sort of UK ice hockey? Or is it going to be a experiment when you get the first few games over here?
I know a little bit about it. I saw some. I was watching the highlights. I like that you guys have longer highlight clips. So I was watching you guys call some of the Blaze clips. Just trying to find games with high scores so I could see how the offense is created in the league. Obviously, I have a little bit of an idea about hockey in Europe, and you look at names that have been over there, and I'm familiar with a decent amount of guys who have come through the league. And you can see who kind of the top scorers are and where they come from, and the difference is just going to be, I think, adjusting to the pace and the time and the size of the sheet. And it's probably easier going from North America to hybrid sizes / Olympic size sheets, just a little more time and space, but then going the other way. But doable either way. But I think I'm familiar with it. And I know the leagues generally the consensus of the league keeps getting better and it keeps attracting higher end talent. And I think you guys would know better than I would about that. But it's definitely growing with regards to that in terms of the players it's attracting. So but yeah, I think it'll take a little bit of time, right? I like I said to coach, I'm glad we have 4 preseason games. I haven't played for a year. we're doing a lot of small area stuff, and I skate with some pros and really high-end junior guys who are drafted out here, and we do a lot of small area games and getting back to your timing, but it'll be a little different in Europe, even if I had played for a year. So I'm looking forward to just kind of getting going and seeing what that's like.
Yeah, so I guess, even with preseason, you're right, few preseason games on the books, which will be good for yourself. But you must be looking forward to that first competitive game, like when the puck drops in anger and it's actually back. A little bit of time off. That must be a moment that you're just absolutely relishing.
Yeah, and I think the coolest one will be, and I don't know, is our schedule out yet, by the way?
It is not out yet.
So it'll be the first home game too. Will be really cool to kind of see the Blaze fans and the Blaze faithful at the Sky Dome and kind of hear the cheer right before. So that'll be really exciting too. But yeah, no, I'm very much looking forward to it. But it's also something that I've come to enjoy the process of the summers and the getting prepared. And just it's trying to be present in every moment, right? If it's getting your butt kicked in the gym with your buddies, it's getting your butt kicked in the gym. If it's playing pickleball and enjoying the sunshine in Vancouver, it's enjoying the sunshine. When it's time to fly on the plane, it's a long flight from Vancouver, it's like just enjoy it because it's a special experience that a lot of people don't get to go through all of these things, right? Getting to train with your buddies in the off season, it's like I was just thinking today how special it is that I worked out and I skated and I'm taking a podcast call for the team I'm going to play for. Like it's a very privileged position to be in. So yeah, to answer your question, I'm absolutely ecstatic to get going, but I'm also trying to just be present in every moment because it's something in 10 years I probably won't be doing. It might be less, it might be more, but it's a very lucky situation I get to be able to do these things.
Yeah, and equally, I'm sure Kevin and the rest of us here in Coventry are very lucky that you're coming over and joining us in what is now a matter of few weeks. One of the key things that we like to sort of try and get across in these sorts of podcasts is the fans get to know a little bit more about you and background, but also a little bit about you as a hockey player. So if how would you describe yourself as a hockey player to the Blaze fans? What are they going to see from you come September time when you get on the ice?
Yeah, it's I think I'm a really honest player. And as boring as that starts off as an answer, like I like to play defensive side of the puck first, and then that leads to offense. Pretty heavy and hard. So I can, I'm a bigger guy who can use my physicality and finish checks and then bump bodies and win faceoffs with that size. And then all of that kind of leads to the skill game. When you look after the defensive side of the puck first and you look after your zone and you're responsible, that's where the offense comes in. And then ringette line down, tops of the circles down, blue line in, kind of that's where you're going to be really offensive and take advantage of players. And then yeah, likes to probably pass first, but can really ends up scoring a lot just because I go to the net a lot and I'll be around there and goes to the dirty areas to bury the puck. So tries to play a really complete game. I know that's something I know Coach Kevin was talking about me, and I saw the clip on our Instagram, and that's kind of me. I try to play an honest 200-foot game where I contribute all over the ice, and whether it's 5-on-5, power play, penalty kill, it's someone who can contribute everywhere, and next man up, whatever the team needs, I'm happy to do.
Ed.
Fabulous. Yeah, no, awesome. I mean, I was just chuckling to myself there, Michael, because I think I said at the top of the hour here that we weren't going to leave any stone unturned, and then we've rattled on for an hour or so. So I think we've checked that box, eh?
Yeah, there you go.
But no, I was just going to say, no, go on, carry on. Sorry, I interrupted you.
No, you're good. I was just gonna say I'm one of the players who maybe doesn't know when to shut it down. So you'll ask me a question, I'll give you the whole story. So some of these podcasts I bet have been probably like 25 minutes, and then there's me, and you're like, and then this happened, and then this happened, and it's I know it's good for you guys in some regards, but it's I know it can be sometimes overly long.
Hey, look, variety is the spice of life, and you're certainly going to get that with the Barnes. You're going to get to playing in the Elite League with the different, the noises that different fan groups make, and also with the different competitions. Of course, we've got the league, there's the cup, there's the playoffs, and yeah, I mean, we're like I say, we're really just looking forward to getting the season going. Stu hit the nail on the head with Kevin's demeanor and how he talks to the players, how he talks to us media guys is just infectious, and it's going to be the same way when he's over here and he can talk directly to the fans. So that buzz is really building up inside us, and I just kind of can't wait for August to get here, and September could get here, and we can get some competitive games on. But just I guess to draw an underline on this edition of the Blaze TV podcast, what's your final message to the fans before you enjoy the rest of your summer and we see you in a few weeks?
It's really excited to get going, and I know I've heard really good things about the Blaze faithful, and can't wait to have them there, and work my butt off for them in the Sky Dome, and hopefully bring home a league championship to Coventry.
Absolutely. Here. Guys, thank you once again for joining us on the Blaze TV podcast. Bring some more of these to you real soon. Bye for now.